Hey, look who's here. Hey, me, Matt.
Hey, me, Matt here. So, yeah, in the event of looking at last night when Kyle and I watched AEW Winter is Coming, it was a good show. And, looking at the, I guess, debut slash return to wrestling in Sting, and today looking at all the, I guess, videos and things on Facebook that I saw, and kind of really made me think a little bit, because I used to be one for nostalgia. I still am to a certain extent, but it also got me thinking, because somebody wrote something and they said, how is it that when WWE has old wrestlers, legends, or whatever you want to call them, return, and it's a bad thing, and all of a sudden Sting comes in and everyone goes absolutely crazy about it and whatever. And I'm kind of thinking about that a little bit, and somebody actually said, well, you have WWE who brings in guys like, let's say, Hogan or anybody, and that helps elevate them and makes them better than the younger talent. They've already had their glory in the sun, and now they're coming back to get more of it, or however that was, I guess. And whereas AEW, you have guys like Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Jake Roberts. They're there to elevate the younger talent, because you have Arn Anderson with Cody Rhodes, and you have Tully Blanchard with Sean Spears and FTR. And so, there's that. Jake Roberts with, well, Lance Archer's over 40, but just watching the show last night, and I can see both sides, like I try to anyways, and my whole thing was, you look at wrestlers who've come back to relive their younger days, I guess, for lack of a better term, and you have guys like Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who came back for a little while in WWE in the early 2010s, maybe a little more than that. You have Tatanka came back in 2003 for a little bit, but then you have guys that kind of won championships when they really didn't need to. You look at Ric Flair, for example. Ric Flair was in his 50s when he came back, and yet he was able to get the Intercontinental Championship for the first time, the Tag Team Championships for the first time with Roddy Piper, and that was pretty cool. But when you think about it, did he really need to do that? Did Roddy Piper really need to have the Tag Team Championships? Yeah, that was great and everything. But the fact is, these guys already had their moment in the sun. And so they're coming back and everything else. And, there's that. Bret Hart. I was a huge Bret Hart fan, and I still am, to a certain extent. I grew up with that. And so, I look at his run in 2010. He came back to WWE. He made amends with Shawn and Vince. And it was basically, he came in and he had a match with Vince, and that was cool. But then he had a match with The Miz for the US title. And he won it. And as much as I'm a fan of Bret Hart, I looked at that and I'm like, fucking seriously? Because here's a guy who, he had a stroke. He was getting better. He was a lot slower. You don't want to do too much to him. And you put the US title on him for what? Because they're in Toronto? And so it just doesn't make any fucking sense to me anyways. Because The Miz got it back. And it wasn't very long that Bret had the US title. In fact, I think it was probably a few weeks, not even a month. Who knows? So I think the other reason too is that you look at someone like Sting. And last night Sting returned. And it was like, my feelings on that are still, it was cool to see Sting. But at the same time, you look at the guy who said that he was going to retire, and this happens all the time. Because I get it, people still feel like they can do it. And so, having somebody like Sting coming back, 61 years old, and who knows what's going to happen. Who knows if they're going to have a match with him down the road. Who knows? But I hope it's not this whole storyline of redemption and leaving on my terms. Because that's what's happening too in WWE as well, because of Edge. And again, I'm an Edge head as well. And it was like, okay, so you have the guy who has a retirement in 2011. He has a speech on the Raw and SmackDown. And then 9 years later comes back. So, it's like, you never know when you're able to continue. And at the time, I'm pretty sure it was, okay, I'm done wrestling. I'm done, and I might as well pack it in. But then they started with getting him back on track. They fixed everything they could, and he felt better. And so it was like, alright. But then, coming back in January and having the match, and then having some matches with Randy Orton and then getting injured. And thankfully, it wasn't as serious as the last issues he was with, and just kind of there. So really, who knows what's going to happen with Edge? And it really pisses me off too, because people say, and I've probably said this in a lot of the videos I've done, either with or without Kyle, but when, wrestling is fake. And yeah, you know what? Okay, storytelling and everything, and that's fine or whatever. But the shit that these people put their bodies through. And they sometimes have to retire fairly young because of it. Now, for Edge's case, who knows? Something happened and he was able to come back. But then you have someone like Goldberg who comes in. You know, he didn't have a very good turnout when he first came into WWE. But when he comes back in 2016, has that rightful match with Brock Lesnar, and that was fine. You know, first he came back. He has the match with Brock Lesnar in Toronto. Again, with Toronto. But then he goes and says he wants a match for the Universal title. So, instead of having a match for the WWE title, he has a match. And I guess that's okay. I can't honestly remember who the WWF champion was. So, who knows? Who really fucking knows? But he won the belt, and then he lost it again to Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Again, probably to make up for WrestleMania 20. So, okay, whatever. But you look at watching Sting and you think, you know, it's almost that saying too little too fucking late. Because you have a guy like Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, who had retired recently, and, you know, he came into the Survivor Series and he said his piece and that was it, and he was gonna ride off into the sunset, and no matter what happened, he leaves, and it's almost like timing. Sting decides that he's gonna come back to AEW. So, I think that looking at this thing with what could have been, you know, you talk about what could have been, and we all know that the whole thing with Goldberg and Undertaker, that match was the shits, and I'm still pretty pissed off about that, but whatever, I think everyone else is. It was apparently a bad day at the office, so. But I think people really wanted to see Sting versus Undertaker's, you know. When Sting, first of all, having a shitty run in WWE in 2015, and you can say what you want about WrestleMania 31, I still think that, it, you know what, either way it would have been, you know, criticized, but whatever, you know, it is what it is. But then having Sting get injured after the Seth Rollins match, and they had to, you know, figure out that he was gonna retire because he had whatever the name is for the neck thing. So who knows how well he is. And then watching a video this morning, this was said that what if Mark Calloway, because it happens so often, and yes, for 30 years he was a WWE, WWF guy, but what if Mark Calloway went over to AEW? It doesn't have to be The Undertaker. What if we get that match that we've all been waiting for? Because I'm not sure how long Sting can hold out for. I can't see him wrestle for very long, if that. But I don't know if it's one of those, I retired from WWE, but I still got it. Because you can retire a character, but who knows what the future holds. Now, that's just me talking out of my ass. I don't know what's planning. I don't know what's going on, and you know what? It can happen. I know I went off on a bit of a tangent in this video, but it kind of made me think because of what I saw on Facebook earlier today, and about legends and overshadowing everybody that's the younger talents in WWE, and for the most part they're right, but at the same time I think there's a lot of that going on elsewhere. So who knows, I mean, if I'm not making sense, I wanted to get that out there in my opinion. So anyways, that's it. Talk to you later. Bye.